very important topic that's happening across Southeast Queensland, and we're going to be happy to give you people some pretty serious information this evening, and we've got some great guest speakers. I'm about to put you on to Sarah Maguire, who will inform you on what is happening at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for coming this horrible evening. It's about the third time we've tried to have this meeting. I don't want to spend too long because we've already started a bit late, but the agenda will be updates since our last meeting and what we can do. I just want to get that out of the way before the end of the night. Our first guest speaker is supposed to be Jim Wilmot, but he's actually been delayed in a traffic accident, but he's on his way now. We've then got Professor G.B. Foster, who might go on after Connie. Do you want to go first, Connie?
I've got to balance it.
And then Trevor Holt, Australian Advocacy Group, and then we're going to have some legal discussions. The lawyer who was supposed to be here hasn't been able to make it as well, so we've got Hugh Carter, who's Malcolm Roberts' legal counsel, who's offered to step in and help us out, so that'd be great. And then we'll finish off with another I don't think that one should be there, sorry. And then we're going to go to Q&A. So updates since the last meeting. We've had confirmation from the Department of Environment saying they did contaminate Dawson Creek and the South Pine River. They were only, not even, they were going to spread even more, but generally only within those areas that were already heavily infested. So I think there's a lot of fear-mongering going on at the moment. And what they're failing to mention in the news is all the chemicals that have now been washed into our waterways because of those flooding events. There's a group called Pesticide Action Group that Trevor will be talking more about. Many of you would have seen as well, we've recently had our first ever arrest, and it happened to be a local resident here in Samford. So we seem to be getting a lot of firsts in Samford. It went viral on social media, and a current affair took up the story, which many of you might have seen last week. And since then we've done multiple rallies and talks, raising awareness about this crucial issue, and there seems to be more residents than ever waking up to the threats to their property rights. So I got an email from the Department of Environment recently. It's taken them 7 months to get back to me. It says there was the accidental dispersal of treatment product and it wasn't compliant with the Environmental Protection Act. The department concluded it is satisfied with the programme and that it's adjusted its procedures and processes to reduce the likelihood of recurrence. And they are going to invest into a suitable local environmental project to offset the matters that arose as a result of the accidental dispersal. I wasn't happy with that, so I wrote back to them and said, well, can you tell me exactly what those suitable environmental projects are? So move on to the next one. So then they wrote back to me and said a range of projects. Whilst they do not have final figures, the cost of the project delivery apparently is far in excess of penalty infringement notices, which combined are in order of $20,000. Where fines are imposed, they are paid into consolidated revenue. When making enforcement decisions, particularly about a government agency, it's appropriate to consider in the decision how the public interest will be best served. So this is just totally inadequate. I mean, if a mining company had done this, the penalty would have been much harsher than $20,000. They've already fined some trucks with turf going across the New South Wales border for $60,000, and they've told us individuals that we could be fined up to $16,000 just for saying we don't want this on our property. So they just get $20,000 for dumping toxic chemicals into Dawson Creek and South Bun River. Anyway, we're moving on. So, has everyone here seen the videos? Has anyone here not seen the videos? Okay, there's a few. Well, if you press the down button again.
While it's still on the bed.
So do you think this rash is from the fire ant treatment?
Yeah. There's been 3 police officers here, and they've got the owner in handcuffs.
Fire ants are one of the world's most invasive pests.
We all want to get rid of fire ants, but we want the choice of how we do it.
These residents are firing back against the war on fire ants, claiming the real invasion isn't the ants.
So this is an absolute waste of taxpayers' money.
Oh, won't be letting them in without a fight.
Hey,
That was
well said.
and this is the video I took of the actual arrest. I'll just.
And you're instructing police and then you're today. She's not complying. We're giving her directions to comply. She's instructed them. She's instructing us now.
And I'm asking here, who has the authority to deem that excuse reasonable? She's allowed to obstruct with a reasonable excuse.
Or when she starts threatening.
But how do you obstruct them peacefully when you've got these people turning up like this? How are we supposed to lawfully obstruct under section 336? Who gets to deem the reasonable excuse, officer? Officer, who has the right to deem that reasonable excuse? Is it by security? I'm just asking because you're a... But she might not be. If she is a... Well, tell them to leave then. They're the ones that set the peace. Well, that's what we're saying here, and we'll put you in the car. We will be making formal complaints. How should be given the right to appeal? She's in a police car right now. Legal right. As you can see, they were very pleased with themselves about this. I don't think they will be once they've dealt with us. So, yeah, this was a pretty sad day in Queensland, I think, to see that happen. And, you know, we're doing everything we can now to support that resident and help her through this, because it will go to trial. We're not going to back down.
No.
So yeah, there's been plenty of injured dogs since the program started. 2 of those dogs on that screen actually died. We're seeing sick animals still being reported. There's Trevor there, he'll talk a bit more about that. So just quickly, funding for the current program. We were hoping with the change to the LNP state government that we would have a change in direction with this. But then Tony Perrott would still have us believe that spending $593 million allocated from the Commonwealth until 2027 will help still eradicate these fire ants by 2032 Olympics. And to this date, the program has had over $1 billion thrown into it. The new LNP government has also pledged a further $24 million to the program to do more aerial baiting, and they said they will not conduct a review of the program until 2027, which is when this current budget runs out, which is very convenient. This ignores our signatures, 3,200 on our parliamentary petition. It was tabled on the 18th of February. So they are just, they're not listening still. 90% of that funding comes from the Commonwealth if we call it eradication. So they're still pushing ahead with saying they're eradicating ants. Our next speaker has an amazing graph that he'll show you, but he's not here at the moment. And they're still continuing to blanket 850,000 hectares of land, which is over 2 million acres, 6 times with these chemical pesticides. I've called my group Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives because I believe there are safer alternatives. We have Professor Joshua King's hot water machine that Trevor will talk to you about. There's people who are having much success with orange oil, diatomaceous earth, and I recently came across a study that says artificial sweeteners lead to fire ants to a bitter end. So if they can kill a little ant, what are they doing to us? Anyway, that's quite promising. I've got plenty of concerns with the programme. You've heard many of them in my previous meetings. The biggest one is there's no comprehensive risk assessment, environmental risk assessment, which is the first thing that should have been done before they started doing what they're doing here. Breaches of permits, water contamination, harm to pets, mental health especially is suffering at the moment with all these men turning up onto properties where women are home alone. Government overreach. Organic farming is at risk here because they've changed the notices to allow these chemicals used on organic farms. Safety of the chemicals, bullying, propaganda, fear campaign, and all the threats of the fines, and now we've had an arrest. So, yeah, there's lots of concerns. What do we want? We want an immediate halt to the blanket spreading of toxic insecticides, especially aerially. We want to commission an independent environmental risk assessment. We wanted to review all adverse event reports concerning pets, livestock, and people. We want to consult and negotiate appropriate treatments for communities and individuals and stop threatening people. Only treat areas with known infestations because there are no fire ants in Samford. Identify and approve alternative treatments. Prevent the spread by properly monitoring the movement of restricted materials. We will never get rid of fire ants because on a daily basis you've got mulch, soil, turf and hay coming from areas like Logan. And empower landowners through education and encourage self-treatment. What can we do? Just quickly send a notice to biosecurity. I sent a letter of demand back in October last year. I still haven't heard back, but at least it shows we're not happy. You can try to negotiate community treatment plans, which is what I think we need to do, and Jim will talk a bit more about that. You must lodge any adverse event you have after treatment if you feel there's a problem, because people are just brushing it off and going, oh, it's just a coincidence, but you must lodge every single reaction. We have a new GoFundMe that we've set up called Halt the Fire Ant Programme, which is helping to support the legal costs involved in this case coming up, and it's really important we show our residents that we're supporting them. Contact your Member of Parliament and follow our Facebook pages for Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives. What can you do individually right now? Every time you get a notice in your mailbox, send them a letter back saying you object, because they're relying on just 1% of people objecting. We've got no trespass signs, no poison zone signs. They seem to work for the first few visits, but then when they turn up with the police, you can see what happened there. We've got biosecurity checklists, they might delay entry a bit. Required compliance with the permits, there's a really good dialogue online that you can talk to them about. And just send legal notices setting out your reasonable excuses. And I think that's me. I won't be talking anymore other than at the Q&A. So thanks for listening, and I will bring on
Okay. I'm from Kelly. I wanted to say there's so many things wrong with spraying this for this absolute area, and I want to discuss some of the reasons. So the first one is when they first started I had an asbestos bleeding spray on my property without me knowing, and I looked at the permits. The permits are made out by the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medical Association, and for asbestos, that was the permit PER 90213, and it said in the permit, do not apply if fire ant populations are not evident and no longer evident. Now, that was all I needed. So when they came, I told them they can't spray on my place. When they came on the road, I had the permit printed. I went out and said, you can't spray here. They then said to me, but we don't know if there's fire ants, therefore we can spray. Yeah, absolute bullshit. I complained to the APVMA and said, they said, oh yeah, we take that very seriously. I complained when they sprayed in the creek. I complained to the fire people and as well to the APVMA. And I think it's very important that if they do something wrong against the permit, we need to complain because they need to see that they are first of all, that they are adverse events, and secondly, that they go against the permit. We need to tell them. Because they can't hide that. They try, but they can't. So they haven't sprayed my place since then, because I complained with the permit. They then, in 2024, took that sentence out. So now it says, do not apply where threatened invertebrate species and or threatened ecological communities are present, except in the fire and eradication zone. So that means over these 830 or 850, the data I got from them was 830,000 hectares. In this pristine land, we can spray. It doesn't matter whether we kill threatened insects or harm the ecological environment. So my question is, where is this threatened species council? Why haven't we informed them? You should. So something changed with the new permit. I think we complained too much as well. So now they actually say for pyriproxyfen, which is the one they spray here, do not apply as a preventative measure for the red and fire ant control. That means if they come on your place and you have no fire ant, it's preventive measure. They're going against the permit. So you need to bring out this permit instead of follow them and say, you're breaching your permit. Now, I told them, if you breach it, you can't breach the permit. They threatened me with money and everything as well. And I went back to them and said, don't bully me. You can't breach your permit, and I can't let you breach your permit on my property, because that makes me responsible as well. So, somehow that worked. So, the second thing is that this is a minor use permit, and for the use and supply of an unregistered aquatic chemical. So what does that mean? The use of a minor use means that the use does not occur across the whole industry, but is only confined to limited segments and used infrequently or sporadically. Well, they're not using this infrequently because they're spraying 4 times a year asbestos and 6 times a year pyriproxyfen. Next one. So limited use means, this definition comes from the APVMA, it's on their website. 10% of total area of crop, number of animals, or area of situation. So for us that would be area of situation. 10%. spraying everything. Or 10,000 hectare, we're spraying 850,000 hectare. So how can that be? How can that be allowed? Okay. So what happens when they actually spray if there's no fire ants? So in 2001, we had one nest. And apparently, and this is their data, it was there for, the fire ants were there already for 15 years. We didn't even know they were there. Such a big impact. And then I looked in November 2024, they actually have a website where they show you where fire ants are. And I counted the nests. And there were 7,975 nests. So we go from one nest to 17,975 nests in an area of 850,000 hectares. So the shocking point is that we actually knew this would happen. Because in Florida, they had this experience, and they said, you cannot get rid or eliminate fire ants at all. So, and their conclusion was that they have actually harmed the environment, and the only way to actually eliminate it is by biological control. They're at the moment looking at a fly that lays the eggs in the fire and cats. So, but what will happen when you spray land? So you get actually rid of all the predators and the competitors for space, and it makes it easier for the fire ant to invade. And you're killing all the ants, well, maybe not all of them, but many species. I don't know if you know, but we have 1,275 ant species. And ants are a vital component for the environment. They aerate and turn the soil over, disperse and germinate seeds, consume organic matter, and provide food for other organisms such as ant eater, and control pest population. So, but it doesn't only affect insects. So what this growth regulator does, it mimics the insect juvenile hormone, and that disturbs the development, and that prevents the larvae from becoming an adult. But in vertebrates, it mimics the action of the retinoic acid, and it blocks the retinoic acid to bind to its receptors. And the receptor then can't initiate gene expression, which helps in the induction of differentiation. So basically, the cell has to differentiate in different organs, in different limbs, and that's not happening when they block it. And that is why we see frogs with no limbs. But it is in the literature, so I just quote the literature here. Okay. And it's also cytotoxic. So they found that in mice, it damages the testicular architecture, interfering with spermatogenesis. Pyriproxyfen is strongly cytotoxic to the liver cells, and that is not only in animals, but in humans as well. And on the label, it actually states that toxicity level for human health is blood toxicant and endocrine issues. But what is even worse is, okay, we have the products, but if they degrade, these degraded products are actually worse than the product itself, and they last for at least 60 days in the environment. So, they're even more toxic than the regulators. They're toxic to enzymes in the soil, bacteria in the soil, and earthworms. Some degraded products of pyriproxyfen are classed as toxic and very toxic. So then we have the bioaccumulation. So those regulators accumulate in animals. They were feeding chicken and cows, and they found that it discovered that it is accumulating in the tissue, and it gets into the eggs with chicken and into the milk with cattle. It accumulates in fish, and it's generally toxic, very toxic to aquatic insects and fish. Well, fish don't die, but insects. So this means that it will biomagnify, which means basically that it will go up the food chain, and you will see frogs and birds and mammals affected. So then we have resistance. They haven't even talked about that. So like, I'm sure you all heard about antibiotic resistance and how bad that is. Well, it's the same story here. If you spread something over a vast area, and affect everything, then there will be resistance developing, especially if you do it on a continuous basis. And we have seen this already. So in Australia, they use pyriproxyfen to control the white fly on cotton, and they have found resistance by this overuse. So we know this is happening. The problem is that it's not only resistant to this chemical, like the growth regulator, but it can also get cross-resistant to other chemicals. And that will be a major disaster for our agriculture if they can't control the pest anymore. So, yeah, so that's another, and I think I'm coming back to it. So, the summary is basically the growth regulators are not only toxic to the insects, but also amphibian and mammals, and to the soil and its habitat, and to the water and its habitat. So if we think that we will not get affected, we're kidding ourselves. Because if it's in the food chain, we will eventually get affected as well. And if we believe that what the government tells us that is safe, then we have not made an action.
Thank you, Connie. We really appreciate you making your way out here. Give us all your unbelievable research. You're an amazing person. Thank you. We're just about to get Gigi Foster up on the list.
I don't know. I can't see it. Vision.
Between now and having a look at. But that's really quite incredible what you just heard in regards to what they're actually doing to us. When they first came to Samford and we were looking at their permits, Sarah and I and a couple of other people used to chase them out of the property because we would show them the permits that they were breaching. Not long after, we'd only take a couple of weeks and they decided, okay, let's change the permit because these people are actually right. We are breaching our permits. So that's when they decided, let's change the permit and let's keep doing what they needed to do. And in the meantime, they poisoned Dawson Creek and then came along to Samford to give a little bit of a talk on how fantastic they are and what they're doing to do our environment to save us from being killed from blue ants. When we, at this meeting that we had, actually said to them, look, we do know you've poisoned our waterways, and that's when they apologised. But they had no intention to apologise to us at that actual meeting until we actually pulled them up and said, this is what you've done. Then they went away for a while, as we all know. The choppers had left, and we thought, okay, it's a bit of a lull before the storm. And then all of a sudden, here they are coming in full force again. Realising that we'd already been to another meeting, and Marnie Manning, who was the head of operations at the time, told us that we will not be using pyriproxyfen in the Samford region and greater region because of our mistake. Now, the other day, when one of our residents were actually arrested, we
Apparently
realised
the volume is
that
not
in a
coming
great
through in the live
waterway
stream. See the
through her
messages?
property, they used pyriproxyfen. We, the arrested found that in her mailbox. Now, whether they put that in her mailbox prior to them poisoning her land with pyriproxyfen, or they did it after, we're not quite sure. But anyway, they used pyriproxyfen on the land, and again, they keep deceiving us. They keep telling us that they're going to do one thing and then they do another. We've got Jim Wilmot's just arrived. You can come up here. Jim's been held up in an accident, and he's come all the way from out west to come and talk to us tonight. And Jim Wilmot is one of the most knowledgeable people I've met in a long, long time in regards to so many issues that are happening to us on our land and our environment and so forth. Jim, do you want to come up now? And you're on. Why not?
Nice rain.
Beautiful rain.
In 3 hours to get here from the Sunshine Coast, there's a bit of accident on the highway, so
Good drivers.
who's ever seen fire ants before? Put your hand up. Anyone who's
Yeah.
ever been bit by a fire ant? Did it hurt?
It's not much.
4 out of 10.
4 out of 10, okay. So I started with Natural Resources and Mines Department of Lands back in 1994, and we were involved in basic species management throughout Queensland. I moved around a lot of places, central Queensland, and then came to Brisbane in a senior policy position. But I've always been involved in invasive species management: locusts, mice, rats, weeds, and a bit of fire ants. So, as you know, I'm going over some old ground here for a lot of people, but they were first detected in Queensland in 2001, fire ants that is, but word is they've been here for 10, 15 years before that, which is a real worry about something like that could be here for 10 to 15 years before that. Buying shipping containers, they think out of South America, we're not quite sure, in the port of Brisbane. And even back then, the eradication program was managed by the state government. They had they formed, I remember it was panic stations, because this pest had caused havoc around the world in a lot of places. And they put together a national agreement where the states and territories put in 50%, and then the feds put in the other 50% of the money. And remember, that only occurs because it's an eradication program through a national agreement. And since 2001, they spread from the initial 40,000 hectares, which was quite an area if you think what 40,000 hectares. It's It's quite a big area, up to, and it's even spread past 850,000, it's up to about 880,000 hectares. So that's not high density throughout. Some areas, like South Brisbane, is very high density in nests. Some areas have got hardly any nests at all. The big worry is outside of this main population hub infestation is where they are that we don't know about still. And this is the latest mapping. You see, despite 23 years, I think it's up to $1.2 billion of taxpayers' money, the net population has not reduced, in fact, it's increased. They've had a good go at it and tried to force it back, but these are really good pests. They're super pests, apparently. And so you see the treatment area, it's basically like they're trying to horseshoe them in, bring them in like a mob of wild cattle. So you've got that surveillance, that blue line around the outer edge, which is surveillance. That's where they do get out and about, look for them, through a lot of different, like from the air, sniffer dogs, ground inspections, and then you've got that other line, that orangey red line, which is the eradication zone. And that's where they do eradication activities. And then beyond that, you've got the full suppression zone where you've got a combination of high density nest area to the south, and it varies. But that's a massive area. So where are we out in, this is a new slide, I put it there. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's right, it has grown. And you know why it's grown? Because there's so much movement. There's so much they call vectors. We're a vector for fire and spread, where we can move pot plants around, move soil around, mulch, or when you look at a lot of the housing development where it's occurred, that's where there's a lot of fire ants. They love disturbed area, you know, just like weeds and that. They love where soil's fresh, and that's where you see a lot of fire ants outbreaks. And so you've got a lot of machinery, soil moving around those areas, and that's how it spread. That exploded over that time. Yep. But this is the most important slide that you'll see tonight, and it's actually called the PECA curve: prevention, eradication, containment, and asset management. So along the bottom line axis it's time, and up the side is area occupied. So, and this, you can use this for the management of every invasive species, not just fire and and there's different graphs, but they're all the same axis. So, prevention. You know, we should have did everything possible to try and prevent fire ants getting in here before we knew that they would spread across 40,000 hectares. You know, that's how we have like as many containers that we try to respect as possible as the budget allows. The best return on investment is spending the money and trying to keep the best out. Try and keep it out of Australia. That's why we want strong biosecurity systems so that we're not even let it come in. But once it does come in, and you see that little green arrow there, then you have an eradication phase. And that is where we throw everything at it. You can imagine everything that we've got in the cupboard, we try and throw at it. Because, there's certain activities you do in that eradication period. Like you use all resources possible, you go and try and find, if you find a nest, like you say, well, how did it get there? Do you trace that? What vector? Was it spread here by soil? Was it spread here by a person moving a pot? Stuff like that. So that is where the state government and all the other states think this program is at. They're still working in that eradication phase after 20 odd years. They're still there. They still think that they can eradicate every single fire ant across 880,000 hectares. That's what they're trying to achieve. And that is why you see a lot of angst in the community, because they're still pushing hard to try and eradicate. But remember, at the moment, they're only eradicating around that outer rim, that 10k wide, I think it is, that outer rim. But in that middle zone, the suppression zone was pretty ad hoc. They've got a suppression team, but I've seen people wait 6 months. 6 months, I've seen people record and not even get any action. That's what's happening. So then you move into a containment phase. When the pest has moved out and they can't control it, it starts to spread and the population increases. And as the population increases, the impacts increase. So we move into the containment phase and they try, and really this is what this program is now, I believe. We're in that containment phase. They're trying to contain it. There's even a map the state government's put out where they've said, well, if we didn't spend all this money, it would be such a lot more area that's spread and infested. Well, that's true. They have contained the pest after all these years. And then in containment, you really try and stem them in and not let them jump over that area. And remember the thing about containment, and we've got to accept this in the Brisbane area, is that containment is forever. We will never get rid of fire ants from the southeast corner. We have to accept that as a community. Never been done in the world, and it's never been done. They've tried to. We're good at containing them, but we will never eradicate them. And then when it moves past the containment stage, you get this acid-based protection, and that's where who knows what lantana looks like. Yeah? It's endemic, so we're never going to eradicate lantana, are we? Yeah. So fire ants aren't there yet. They're not at that stage yet. I still think they're out within that containment, pushing up on the outer edge containment in some areas, because if they were an endemic, that'd be across Australia. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to let this pest get across Australia. It will have impacts. We're going to do our best we can to contain it. But we've got to be realistic. And that's why I've said this is a reality check, that we will never eradicate them. But remember, the funding stops from all the other states and the feds when it is no longer an eradication project. That is why after all these years and that massive spread, they're still calling it an eradication project. It's not. But look, beyond that, they have eradicated fire ants out of this high density zone. Gladstone, Perth, Sydney, there's a few spots down south where they're going hard to eradicate it, over the border, Waddell, Wollongbar. So it is possible to eradicate fire ants when they're just discovered. Remember back to that graph, this initial let's jump on it? But they were never going to eradicate it, even at the 40,000 hectare stage. They should have stemmed them in hard and tried to contain them. And remember, when you try and contain something, they call it the goose effect in biosecurity, where it can always jump over the containment zone. So you've always got to be ready to jump on it. And that's what we're going to have to do forever. So we're going to have to get used as a community to manage fire ants forever. So the current government-led approach, it is pretty heavy-handed. Let's be honest. I've done compliance activities with landowners. I know a guy, this mad guy when I used to live in Minburn and work for the Farmers Coast County Council. This guy wrote to me and said, well, I'm going to go over. He's a real mad, he loves his plants, exotic plants. He was swallowing exotic fruit overseas that was illegal to bring into Australia and bring the seeds through in his stomach, do the business and plan them out. It's true. So I was involved in a project where he got frisk certs at the airport and searched really well. And then we searched his property as well. So because, that's nearly like biological terrorism. So there's people out there that do that type of stuff, believe me. So this is why you're seeing the heavy-handed compliance activities that the Department of Prime Ministry is handing out, because they still think they're in this eradication program. And really that's leading to disengaging and discontent and fear of reporting. You know, if you're going to be made to treat your property and you don't have much say in what it's treated with, it's all about fines and sections of this, sections of that. And don't get me wrong, we've all got a biosecurity responsibility. We've all got a role to treat pests, to stop pest spreading. There's a lot of cost shifting to local government and the community as the mass of fire ants starts to spread, and they're trying to hang on to the best they can any form and resemblance of control, because it is a massive job. You imagine 880,000 hectares of ants they're trying to control, and all those different vectors and spread pathways trying to jump and get out and manoeuvre them. And one of the things I've noticed is they're very disrespectful of private property rights. Your private property. You know, within the bounds of the law, you should be able to do what you want on your private property. You know? And if someone's going to go and treat your place, well, you should have a bit of choice of what they're treating it with, when they're treating it, how they're treating it, or you might want to treat it yourself. And there's slow response times. And a lot of that is poor coordination, poor planning, and it's just because of the massive area as well, they can't get everywhere. There's a lack of transparency. You'll notice when government, they've done this for as long as I can remember the state government, they like saying how many tonnes of bait they've put out, how many inspections they've done, how many properties they've inspected. They like talking about outputs, but they never talk about the percentage gain towards eradication, do they? How quick, what measurement? What report are they giving us of how they're going in achieving that eradication goal back to the Pecker curve? Because it's easy to report on outputs, and it sounds really good. So many properties inspected, so many tonnes of bait used, we're doing great things. But we don't know how they're going and progressing towards eradication. So that lack of transparency. And if you think of it, in reality, it's a containment program. We should have some more choice, because when you look at a community, there's people in every community, and I found this myself with biosecurity all my life, that people that don't mind what chemicals used on their place, as long as you kill that damn pest, you just get in and kill it. But there's people that want to do things naturally and use natural products, and that's okay too. And when a pest gets to this stage, you should have those options. And those options are out there. Look at, where's Trevor Hop? Here's Trevor. Look at that big flash machine he's got. What do you call that machine, Trevor? Fire ant soup maker. It turns her into soup. And that's proven technology overseas too. It's backed up by what university is it, Trev? So it's not just something Trev's dreamed up. It actually works and can give an alternative treatment option for people who don't want chemical use. Yep. So in the biosecurity field, one of the principles of biosecurity is you've got to collaborate with the community. You've got to build ownership of the community to the pest issue. Yeah? You've got to bring the community with you. And the department hasn't done a bad job in some respects, but in other respects they've let me down. Community-led and community-driven syndicates are grassroots initiatives where the communities take the lead in managing the pest. You leverage local knowledge, resources, the networks, and it's culturally sensitive. It takes note, well, if you don't want to use full-on toxic chemical or a chemical, you might want to use a natural alternative, or you can. It takes in that spectrum, which it should. Yep. This is a flash diagram I did up trying to kind of visualise what it is. So in a community-led program, you've got, and before I go on to this flash diagram, there's syndicates already established for other pest species that have worked. Some syndicates have worked for over 100 years where the community's driven. And that's for, wild dog syndicates out west, the control of wild dogs. We've got syndicates for the control of locusts. We've got syndicates for the control of weeds or feral pigs. It's nothing new in the field of biosecurity and pest management generally. So you've got state government takes a little bit of step back, but they're still involved because they're like the chief executive officer of biosecurity in Queensland. So they've got oversight and they give resources to local governments. Yeah? Because local governments have these things called under the Act a biosecurity management plan. They've got a responsibility and obligation to manage declared animal and plant species that are declared under the Biosecurity Act. And on the right side, you've got local community takes the lead for the management on private properties. On your own land, you take the lead for managing fire ants on your own land. Just like you would with lantana, fireweed, and the other pests. Now on this side, you've got local government on the right, down the bottom. And local governments are the closest level of government to the people, yeah? And so, you usually have a lot of interface with your local government. So, the syndicates I've seen, they provide a lot of support, like administration support, a lot of data support. They might even try and coordinate some of the local pest controllers for you. And then you've got management services, so provision of treatment, like you might have someone like a church set up, or you might have professional pest controllers that you can call on in the syndicate, because not everyone has the time to go and do their own fire ants, do they? So they can call on a management service, a provision of treatment for control. And so really, that sweet spot in the middle is where you want to be, is where the community feels engaged, and there's collaboration with all those other stakeholders. So you don't feel that real top-down approach from government, do it this way or we're going to arrest you. Do it this way or we're going to give you a $14,000 fine. That type of stuff. So it takes that load off you. But remember, the state government still thinks it's an eradication project. We've got to convince them that it's not an eradication project. It's a containment project. And we need them to look at trialling these symbols. Start. So the model, representation is dominated by community members, and I'm just going on what other syndicates that I've seen around Australia are. Local government usually provides admin coordination and logistical support. State provides funding directly to local governments in line with their biosecurity plans. So some biosecurity plans under local governments I've seen have syndicates attached to them. They might be for wild dogs, might be for rabbits, might be for pigs, might be for certain weeds. It can be for fire ants as well in certain areas. State and local governments are responsible for the management of their own lands, and so they should be. Our highways, our schools, our roadways, local, state, our parks, local government, state government should be. It's their land, they're responsible for it, get them to do it. So what's the benefits of a syndicate? What I've seen, a lot of people in the community look out for each other. If the community's connected, they know what's going on. You've got that informal community network that happens with your mate, so-and-so knows so-and-so. If your old mate's got fire ants over there, he's done a good job. And that's what really drives them. Increased participation and ownership is the key for the management of any pest species. People feel more connected to the outcomes. Instead of government doing all the work, government are pretty inefficient. Have you noticed that? They are, no. To me, it's a libertarian coming in there. I think we've got a bit too much government at the moment. Getting in the way, telling us what to do, what to say. I won't go down that path. So when people feel more connected to the outcomes in their community, they are more likely to stay engaged and maintain control with the measures over the long term, because that's what we want. Because remember, back to that invasion curve, containment is forever. So we've got to set ourselves up with mechanisms where we keep on suppressing fire ants forever. And that's what we've got to start doing this, because we've got to work out the right mechanism of how we're going to manage fire ants so they don't take over our lives and start to really impact our lives. Yeah? And so we've got to get ready to do it. We should be practicing how to do this now, because they're not going to go away. We've got to keep suppressing them. Yep. Cost efficiency, like I said before. I think in a lot of areas the community can do it a lot cheaper than what the government does it. There's better coordination. Like look at some of the tree care groups, the land care groups that do a lot of environmental work. Anyway, there's a lot of good community groups, Lions, Rotary. You know, the community is networked across a lot of things. We've got SES groups, rural bush fire brigades, all that kind of stuff. We know how to do stuff. The community knows how to lead and do best. Yeah. Social cohesion. So people bring. Not everyone has got the time to be involved. I'm not saying everyone has. You might want to be involved, and you might say, "Well, in my place, I'm just going to. It's great that you've got a syndicate. I work full time. I'm just going to get a pest controller in, but it's part of the program that the syndicate's involved in." So people have varying degrees. The regulations, you know, there's going to be less compliance. You're going to save the government money. So they're not having coppers coming around and arresting people or threatening you with bits of paper. You're going to feel that you're more in control. Yep. It's adaptable and flexible. It's more flexible than the bloated bureaucracies we find ourselves with in Queensland at this time. They can quickly adapt. Like imagine if you know, I don't know this area very well. Like Samford Creek, you might have a flood, and you might have an increased spread of fire ants that little bugs grab together and they float along en masse. And they might come into a new area which has been treated by the city before. Well, you can rearrange and get to that and treat it as a community quicker, or get pest controllers in, get someone like. Again, it doesn't have to be chemical. There are effective ways to treat isolated nests. Yep. Sorry, can you just go back up to this one? So ecologically sound solutions. So community members are more often motivated to use environmentally friendly and sustainable methods of pest control to protect local biodiversity. You just think of the amount of chemical that's been put on land that's treated 6 times every 2 years over the last 20 odd years in a lot of chemical harm. Sure, 1 or 2 treatments might have an impact, but when you're doing it 20 years, no matter how small the toxicity of that chemical is, it's going to have some impact. And no one's done a study of what that's going to look like after 20 years. Anyway. So we should be trying, and that's back to that Becker curve. That's where eradication is so important. I don't mind using chemical if it's to eradicate something and you don't have to use much, but the more a pest spreads, yes, you've got to use so much more chemical. So look at the amount of chemical they are using because they've got to look 880,000 hectares, mate. That's a lot. So the time for that mass chemical use is, it's gone, that window's closed because the pest spreads so far. The government to do it out of the air and everything better. That's not to say I don't agree with a real jump on everything up outside the containment zone, like the stuff they found at North Arm and that. We should be jumping on that quickly because that's a new area. We have got the potential to eradicate that. Yep. Knowledge sharing and capacity building. The more we use syndicates, the more we can share what works and what doesn't work. What works over here might work over there. You've got different landholders, you've got different types of properties, different terrains. We'll build up that expertise over the years through the syndicate developments to actually get more best practice. That's what we're going to need. Improved monitoring and early detection. So in a community, you'll know more about where the pests are because you can have data sets that local government can provide. If you feed information in, local governments can provide you that information. It does work with other syndicates that I've been involved in. They have really good mapping. You'll know exactly where the pests are, the fire ants are, and aren't in the Samford area if you've got good active community syndicates. Yep. So the benefits again, it's grassroots approach, not top-down. People in Australia are just sick of the top-down authority and they want to have more control of what's going on in their lives every day. It's collaborative, so we're still working with the state, we're still making guidance. We're still working with the local governments because they're our local governments, you know, we interact with them every day. But it puts the community more in control. Because a lot of people in the community don't feel that much ownership at the moment. Engagement, ownership and empowerment. Respect, this is a big one, it respects individual differences. And that's what's not going on now, and it respects your property rights. Because it's your property. That's what you've worked for all your life. That's the legacy you want to leave your kids. You should have more control and more say in what happens on your property, yeah? Yep. Unfortunately, there's some challenges. Political leadership to adopt a more collaborative, community-driven model rather than a top-down approach. We've got to get those in power to accept that, to even look and trial different models, rather than we're just going to keep what we're doing for the last 20 odd years. State government provision of program dollars to local government and communities. State government likes hanging on to the money. Money's power. They don't like giving it to communities and local governments. There has been some local governments that have complained already. They get responsibility from the state government, but they don't get any of this with it. That stays with the state. So there's got to be some letting go of funding to give it to community syndicates and local government. This is a big one. Acceptance by authorities that focus of the program is one of ongoing containment and suppression, not eradication. To move them out of that eradication phase to one of containment. That's a really big one. Because, you know, they like using the eradication word, don't they? Every second word they talk about the new eradicate, because it sounds fancy, it sounds like they're going to win. Well, I'm here to say they're not going to eradicate fire ants. And it's not just me saying it, there's a heap of other experts saying the same thing. It's politically dangerous to admit failure though, but it's time they admit that they need a different approach. We've got to set ourselves up for the long-term management of fire ants. Yep. So that's it. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jim. Now, I want you to know that Jim Wilmot is actually a biosecurity officer and does know biosecurity, so everything he has, all that information he has just given you is actual fact. Amazing. Jim's also a Libertarian candidate for the Senate and set up Property Rights Australia. Now that is a very important thing that you need to take away with you, property rights. We're not here to talk about it tonight, but if you ever have any questions about your property rights, feel free to call Jim Wilmot because he will embrace you with everything you need to know in regard to it. Our next speaker tonight is Trevor Holt. Trevor's got some amazing stuff to tell us. He puts his hard yards in. He has been fighting this sham for a long time, and we're very grateful to him. Thank you.
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks for the opportunity, Sarah, and invite me to have a few words. I'm surprised it's 2025 in Queensland, Australia, and my human rights are not guaranteed. My property rights are not mandated, and I'm being coerced by government officials to do stuff that I don't want to do, get treatment on my property. So, and that's the reality for all of us. All of us are in the same boat. Even though Queensland has a Human Rights Act, there's nothing that mandates that the government has to give us our rights. And they have deemed that fire ants is enough reason, the eradication of fire ants is enough reason to deny our fundamental human rights and property rights. Specifically privacy is a big one. Sarah said it before, especially among women in the population. It's seems to be quite targeted. So what I've done is everything in my power to try and remedy this situation. One of the first things I did was reach out to experts because I'm no expert on fire ants. I didn't know anything about fire ants. I'm just a simple guy doing a bachelor in psychology, so getting back at home, living my life. Before I got dragged into this, I had a picture there, 2 of my calves have died as a direct result of this program from their parents being excessively exposed to these toxic chemicals, and the bioaccumulation in them harmed the fetus and embryo development of 2 of these calves, and they were euthanized at 6 weeks old. So that's how I got involved in this campaign, and the more I communicated with the program and the more I learnt about the program, the more concerns I had. So I brought it on myself, and I thought the biggest problem was there was no alternative to chemical solutions. The program didn't recognise anything that wasn't chemical. They had their chemical solutions, and that was it. So I reached out and I just Googled it, and Dr. Joshua King had a $100,000 US government grant that he got given for brilliant work on this patent design for hot water treatment method. So I reached out to Josh and I said, Josh, can you help me? I want to build your machine here in Australia to demonstrate to the Australian government that there are alternatives that can work, and I want to use your machine and set it up here. So we had a few meetings and had a few discussions, and I spent a lot of my partner's money, I suppose, on a trailer. It's got a big furnace on the back to make hot water. So it was about a $30,000 investment, and specifications were provided by Dr. Josh King. We had to retrofit out because it's hot water, 90 to 95 degrees, continuous flow, and low pressure design, which is not very common in Australian manufacturing. It's not a very common application. Obviously, a lot of these applications have a high flow thing. So we had to retrofit out something that was existing here already. We swapped a few things around, put a bypass valve on it, change the pressure switch to a flow switch, and we had to change a few things to get the specifications. But we ended up with this hot water machine, and talking to Josh about what's going on here in Australia. I said, look, this is what's going on, and he says, oh no, that wouldn't be going on. I said, no, they're prophylatically treating 850,000 hectares of, oh no, they wouldn't be doing that. Have you got any proof they're doing that? I said, yeah. Just, I gave him the link to the website. And then a few days later, he wrote an open letter of concern. And if we go, sorry, let's keep going. Yeah, so Dr. Joshua King's open letter of concern had a few, and I've got a copy here, if anyone wants it, I'll print out a heap of copies. But basically, the duration, and as Jim's already suggested, the duration of the fire ants in southeast Queensland and the distribution of them in southeast Queensland is impossible to eradicate. So, and that's what Jim sort of said. They've been here that long and over such a diverse area that it's impossible to eradicate, and that's the experience around the world. He says it's not anecdotal, it's fact, and he's quite candid about that. But the repeated excessive exposure to the chemicals creates a resistance. You heard Connie talk about this a bit. But that's not the only problem that Dr. King talks about as well. He also talks about a phenomenon called bait shyness. So fire ants actually learn not to take the bait back to their queen. So not only can they develop a resistance, as Connie says, but they also, there's a phenomenon where they don't want to kill their queen and they just ignore the bait. So they do that as well. and obviously to the non-target species adverse effects. And Connie talked about that too, about the native ants being the best form of protection moving forward. But only having chemical solutions to what they're doing in their approach exacerbates all them other issues, because obviously if you had hot water treatment every now and again, or managing the sensitive areas along the creek, so that would prevent the creek from being poisoned, for example, or not putting fipronil on where the kids are playing. Soccer is probably ideal, but so having a diverse approach will help with the immunity and the resistance to the chemicals and the bait shiners and all that sort of stuff. So So if we go to the next one, Sarah. So it's painted, obviously in the United States, it's a painted machine. So basically, what happens, we've got a couple of minutes, basically, yeah. No, we haven't, we're going to keep going. Okay, yeah. So just a painted, already painted, licensed through the University of Florida, so I've got a license there for it. And I'm in contact with Dr. Joshua King quite regularly, talking about it and treating fire ants. So in addition, it's actually licensed through Australian Advocacy Group. I set up Australian Advocacy Group, and I got my own key performance indicators. Obviously, we want everyone that gets a notice to object to them. So that's the number one thing. So I set up objection at aagpilot.com. The program denies everything, so and we don't believe they're very transparent. So by CCing or BCCing objection at AAG, then that way I've got a copy of everyone's objections, so they can't lie about how many there are. I've got a website you can subscribe to, so when we do an article or we want to get teams of people together at a property, I can email everyone, so by subscribing to that. Then obviously there's financial members of AAG, people that are contributing to the campaign. We've got billboards, there's 3 billboards around, one at Minden, one at towards Toowoomba and one at the end of there somewhere. But and we've done the aerial flights, sky signs, we've done a few of them, so, and then individual service agreements. So AAG is just empowering communities with information to make informed decisions. It's a unique social network of individuals, commercial businesses, charities and other entities of a similar Australian beliefs and values, providing a platform of social advocacy. And that's what it is. We've got to enjoy the journey. We can't focus too much on individual results. It's just an everyday journey, and it's just a social thing where people, members are trying to create change, initiate change in the government and move away from this reckless prophylactic treatment. So the current campaign is about, as everyone says, recognising fire ants eradication is impossible, ending prophylactic distribution of toxic chemicals, utilising direct nest treatments, actually treat fire ant nests, that's what we're campaigning for, providing alternatives to chemical treatment for managing fire ants, that's where Sarah's ideas come in before, plus the hot water machine, subsidies for private property holders to utilise these approved, but at the moment there's only subsidies for the chemicals that they're offering, utilising alternatives to manage fire ants, placing more weight on individual rights. We've seen in the COVID Senate inquiry that not enough weight was put on human rights. I feel that's happening now as well with this. They haven't learnt their lesson. As Jim says too, respecting private property rights and individual choice. Some people won't report fire ants because they don't want the chemical treatment. So it's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? And just utilising community and all these people here and using a lot of voices to initiate change. I've written thousands of letters to all the members of Parliament, federal, state and local. It's not going to work. The only way we're going to put pressure on them is through people power, through all your guys speaking up and hopefully in the Senate with guys like Malcolm talking out for us and this like that. But people power is the only way forward, guys. Yeah. So that's all. And anyone wants any questions about the machine or anything, just come.
Next, we have Hugh Carter, who is a legal counsellor. Hugh stepped in because our lawyer that we had coming couldn't make it. So we really appreciate it, Hugh, if you'd like to come up and have a little chat to us in regards to the legal. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kind of invited to do this at short notice, but I'm glad it was. And I'd like to firstly thank everybody for attending. And this is a really, really important issue that I became involved in not long after Dawson Creek was contaminated by aerial bombing of the chemicals, nasty little red granular, green, yellow granules. They were all over the rocks, kill off all the native life, and it's just astounding how just appalling people can be. You know exactly what they were doing. They ultimately said it was an accident. I feel like that's not a BS. All right, look, I'm here as a lawyer. I better talk a bit like a lawyer. Yeah, how's that? Better? All right, I'll park it on my chin. There you go. It's too terrible on the voice, wouldn't it? All right, now, we've been approaching this from a political perspective. I work as an advisor for Senator Roberts. I've been doing that for 6 years now, and it's a wonderful job. It gets me to do things which I can really get my teeth into. We had planned to ask questions about the fire out programs and the eradication program directly to those responsible, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medical Authority, who are the ones who put out the permits, and supposedly have done all that research, and also to the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and such, to actually put them on the spot as well as to what they were doing. I haven't got a lot of time to speak with you, so I'm going to actually do something slightly different. I'm going to point out a couple of the significant problems from a legal perspective that are going on, and then I'm going to actually swing across and say how you might respond if these people descend on you. One of the things that the legislation says is that you can, in fact, obstruct somebody coming onto your property with a view to applying these chemicals if you have a reasonable excuse. What is a reasonable excuse has not yet been publicly said by any of these authorities. They're trying to leave it up to their own officers who have very little training, very little understanding. They're under orders to basically get this stuff out there, and they're not listening very carefully to what people are saying back to them. So let's just quickly have a look at the permits, because Connie was very good in pointing out some of the basic problems already within that. The first restraint in permit number PER 87728, that's the one that deals with pyriproxyfen. It says, do not apply as a preventative for red imported fire ant control. Well, it seems a bit, straightforward, doesn't it? Preventative. They're not trying to say as a killer to bump them all off. They're saying as a preventative. Well, this being the case, why has it been widespread by aerial and ground application to properties where there's no fire ant activity? Or it's been identified by persons from the National Fire Ant Eradication Program in breach of the permit. That would seem to me to be a pretty reasonable excuse. Wouldn't you think so? Well, that's one that I suggest you keep in mind. What Australian research has been done in relation to the effects of the chemical on humans? Well, overall, as far as I know, and I think they're trying to rely on some international stuff, but there's been absolutely nothing done in Australia that one can easily, quickly point to say it is safe and effective. because that's what they love to use. The first restraint in permit number PER 90213 relates to the usage of S-methoprene. It says, do not apply where fire ant populations are not evident or no longer evident. So even if they've been there and gone, you shouldn't use it again. Now, that being the case, why persons from the National Fire Ant Eradication Program insisted on applying the chemical multiple times on properties where no fire ant activity has been seen or is evident. And that's in breach of the permit. If they're going to do that, that would seem to be a pretty reasonable excuse. Please note that down. Now, they say in relation to S-methoprene that you shouldn't allow or use it when it's not possible for poultry to have direct access to the baits. Does that mean, is it a poison to bird life? What about our native birds? All the environmental protection people? Oh my God, where are the Greens? It was a bit of a political shover, wasn't it? All right, but nobody's talking about that. And the threats to our native life. If it's going to bump off fire ants, it's already bumping off all the other insects as well, which are part of the food chain for small animals and birds and stuff like that. Like me, I suspect you all actually do have some concern that you don't want them to all just go and die. So we do have a role in protecting the environment, and that includes them as well. Now, I'm confused. This permit, the one that I'm just talking about in S-methoprene, I'm confused because on one hand it says that treatment may be applied into waterways up to 1.5 metres from each bank, that means in the water. Yet at the same permit it states the chemical is, quote, very toxic to aquatic life. Are they stupid? In their own permit? You think that looks a bit silly? Well, when something is as inconsistent as that, that sounds like a very reasonable excuse to me. And certainly, as Connie said, no Australian environmental impact study that we can point out to that would indicate that it's so effective. All right, so we were also going to ask some questions, and basically my questions, or the questions that Malcolm was going to ask, ask in relation to the Australian pesticides guys. We also had some questions which we were shaping up to ask in relation to DAF as well. That's the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. We were going to ask them what their overview was. Why are they using intimidating and overreach tactics? Since when is it okay for gates and fences to be broken down with police presence, threatening those even with reasonable excuses, who withhold consent to strangers, forcing their way onto their properties, with a view to spread poison when there's not a fire ant within Cooee. And that's exactly what happened at Beachmont yesterday. It's happening all over the place. Now, as I said, a property owner can obstruct and refuse access to offices if they have a reasonable excuse. This is a burning question. Now, to work out what a reasonable excuse is, generally the test at law is simply to put that question to reasonable, ordinary people, and what would that person think? Would that be a reasonable excuse? So, you heard it first here. These are the sorts of questions we would put to the organisation, to DAF, the department, who has the responsibility for overviewing all of this. These are the sort of things, and I'll put it to you. And nice loud responses, please. Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals represent a threat to domestic animals, dogs, cats and birds if they're exposed to toxic chemicals?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals represent a threat to poultry, livestock, fruit and veg growing on the property?
Yes. Yes.
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals are not being administered according to the safety requirements under the permits?
Yes.
Why is aerial application of the pyriproxyfen occurring on a wide scale on areas where there's no fire ants have been identified? And the permit says, do not apply as a preventative measure for red-imported fire ants. Is that a reasonable excuse?
Yes.
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the administering authority has already disastrously polluted a significant waterway in the Samford Valley near Brisbane, killing extensive native marine, reptile and insect species? And I know that's true because I was there and saw it. So is the Senator, by the way. Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals have already been shown to not discriminate between insects and have already wiped out thousands of domestic and native bees and their hives?
Yes. Yes.
All right, you don't have to respond. I think I've got the point. No environmental safety in relation to humans. Who's responsible for what constitutes a reasonable excuse? And really, the best answer to that is it should be by court. Not some piece of a public servant. We know that money is the root of all evil. Will DAF step up to pay compensation to those affected by the misapplication of the fire ant eradication program? That's what needs to happen. If anybody wants to actually talk about these things, we'll be around for a bit after all of this, and anybody can make contact with the office and come and see me, and I'll give you a phone number. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't like politicians very much. Yet I've been working for one for nearly 6 years. I've never ever considered working in the area of politics before that. I'm a barrister, I still am. I still hold my practicing certificate, and I've had that since 1985. So it's actually a while. I've worked as a lawyer very closely in what's called the protective jurisdiction. That basically means I've worked assisting for 30 years, assisting vulnerable people in the community. People with intellectual disabilities, their families, people with mental illness and their families. And I did that until I had a cup of coffee. This fellow over here, Senator Malcolm Roberts, he said, I'd actually like to have a chat with you, Hugh. Somebody said that you've been doing good work. He said I didn't like politicians. That's still pretty close, with one specific exception. I really like Senator Malcolm Roberts. And he is very, very worthy of support for the coming federal election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. And Malcolm, if you'd like to come and have a few words, please. I've got a fair bit of energy moving around my shoulders.
Oh, it just went off.
Got a fair bit of energy moving around my right shoulder. I've been practicing meditation for about 24 years, and every now and then bits and pieces of energy start moving. So I'll just use the microphone like this. First of all, I want to congratulate everyone involved. Everyone. Look at the people. Sarah, Connie, Trevor, Hunter. Hunter's here from Boona area. He's done fabulous work. We've been to Gatton, Boona, Currumbin, Samford. This is a common problem right across the southeast. We've also met with Ven, Brett, and the teamwork evident is quite phenomenal. We sat down in Ven's coffee. He gave us coffee and lunch actually before we came out to Dawson Creek. Really wonderful team.
This is a professional outfit who are working for nothing. They're very, very good, and they're working right across. We've got Kenneth Jr. down in the Gold Coast. We've got Gary Duffy, married to Connie Turney. We've got, well, what is the main... We've also had Jim now. Jim's fabulous on biodiversity, he really is. He's been working with us for some time. This issue is not about red ants. This issue is about democracy and saving our country. I can tell you that now. The common threads are right throughout. And it's also about our children. That's what it's about, the future of our children. And it's about, as Jim pointed out, and other speakers have pointed out, about property rights. And property rights are fundamental to enterprise, to human progress, and to a free enterprise. I've seen people in 4 or 5 different groups now have been involved with fire ants, from the first one at Gatton, which was probably about 2016, 2017. People have got a variety of feelings. Some are feeling angry, feeling frustrated, feeling depressed, mental health problems, as Trevor keeps pointing out. Some are feeling excited because they're getting ready for battle. But some are feeling frustrated and hopeless. This is overwhelming for so many people because it's basically based on bullshit. And it's hard to fight bullshit. The needs that people are talking about and are needing: safety, health, mental health, property rights, security. They also want justice, honesty and truth, and they're not getting that from the state and federal governments. I'll get on to what we've been doing later. It's failed. I don't need to go through the history now from 2001 and 15 years earlier than that. It's failed from 1 fire ant nest to now over 2,000, as I understand it. And it's now encompassing a far greater area. It has completely failed. What's more, I've been asking people, what is the danger of fire ants? I can't find any. How many people have died from fire ants, Jim? I've only heard one problem with fire ants. Some lambs were inconvenienced. But the other thing I want people to see is not just democracy and property rights, it's also care. These people are caring. And what I've seen time and time again, I used to be one myself, working voluntarily to fight a government over a government lie. Spending your money, billions of dollars of our money, to hoodwink us, and we have to do that for free as volunteers. These people are all volunteers. As I said, we've been chasing this issue for several years now. Gatton, Boona, Currumbin, Samford. I'll give you a little taste of what happened at the first one I went to, Gatton. The people from the state government came and said, we want you to go to the 3 booths at the back. There are tables set up. You can ask all the questions you want. We said, no. We want a forum. That's what we want. They said, you can't have a forum. The booths are here set up. They did not want a discussion of what are they afraid. They did not want a discussion. We stood up and we debated with them and got a discussion in an open forum, and they did not like it. This is about control. This is a very serious issue. It's about the environment, the human health, including mental health, property rights, governance. I've been to Dawson Creek and saw the damage there firsthand. It's also about protecting the law, because these people seem to be above the law, the people pushing this. Time and time again we see this coming up. Let's kill the environment to protect the planet. That's what they're doing. They're doing it in the name of the environment without a real threat. We've done letters to state and federal ministers. We've had questions in Senate estimates that Hugh prepared, but the Albanese government called off Senate estimates after just 1 day. It's supposed to be 10 days. We've done speeches, we've done rallies, we've had Hugh go to advise people. We've been in an inquiry and asked questions of witnesses in an inquiry. This is a state issue, but we have been using our federal influence to try and help. Fundamental to all of this is a massive conflict of interest. There is a conflict of interest because, as we understand it, we've been told, I think Sarah's got the details on this, the husband of a state member of parliament has the contract for dispersing the chemicals. He also, as I understand it, has a contract for supplying the chemicals. And if I'm wrong, I'll happily apologise, but that's what I understand, and these people have done their research. And there are no ants in Samford Valley, but they're getting paid to spread this toxin. This is all about, like so many other issues facing governments in this country, this is about control, property rights, and wealth transfer. Transfer from you to the people pushing this treatment. We have a perfect solution: self-treatment. And self-treatment brings responsibility with citizens. When it's imposed, as Jim kept talking about, imposed over the top of people, it is hideous and ineffective. When it's self-treatment, people take responsibility. And responsibility is the magic word. This is about democracy, and democracy thrives on responsibility. The key problem here is governance, shoddy governance, repeatedly at state and federal level. Governments are supposed to serve the people, is that right?
Yes.
Governments are supposed to serve people, aren't they? That's what's supposed to happen. Is it happening? No. The number one problem in governance in our country is that politicians refuse to use data when making decisions, policies and laws. They refuse. And they quite often contradict the data. Heard of climate change, climate fraud, COVID mismanagement, COVID deceit? They contradict the data. They don't use the data. Democracy must be active. When democracy is passive, it becomes tyranny. It's happened time and time again throughout history. What we're seeing here is democracy in action with these people because they're active. Democracy is not just turning up every 3 years and casting a vote. Democracy is about holding politicians accountable, about writing letters to them, being activists like this, peaceful activists. Democracy is about holding them accountable. And so we will continue to support you in whatever ways we can. But thank you so much for standing up for democracy, Sarah, and all your team. It's a marvellous what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Senator Roberts. I've noticed someone in this audience that has come in as a member of our community, Samford Greater Region, and that is Senator Gerard Rennick. I'm just wondering, I haven't even asked you, but are you willing to have a little chat to us this evening, Senator? Thank you very much.
Cheers, thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. I won't take up too much of your time. I live just around the corner on Acreage as well. I have written to Tony Perry about this, who is the Minister responsible, State Minister responsible for this. I'm still yet to get a reply. But I guess my question is, as a concerned resident on Acreage, is do we know why that lady at Highfield, why they went onto her property? Why did they pick her property and are they going on to other properties around?
They did a few others that afternoon or that day. They did a few other properties. They brought the police with them that day. For some reason, they seemed particularly picking on that area, and it just seems like, you know, there was another gentleman that was supposed to have been done that afternoon, but they didn't even go to him when they realised he was objecting. But then they picked on our other residents. So, yeah.
And was that because they claimed there were fire ants there, or they just that's all totally preventative? Okay, sure. Oh, so they're still saying that they're going to do the entire area? Okay. Right, okay. Well, I guess, I don't know if that added any more information, but look, obviously I'm concerned. Obviously the federal election come up, so I may not be here after June 30, but while I'm still here, I'll continue. I will follow up with Nikki Boyd as well, and hopefully, I'm probably trying to remove fire ants, but there's no point, as been pointed out very well tonight, you know, you run the risk of damaging other biodiversity, other ant species, and a heap of other things as well. clearly what they're doing is not working. Why on earth are you spraying somewhere where there's no fire ants, when there's lots of fire ants down in Logan and those areas? Why not just spray where it's identified and then leave it at that? And then you don't keep going back and hopefully you can shrink it down into a manageable size. But look, I'll leave it at that, and thanks for coming out tonight, and hopefully we can solve it in the future. Thank you.
And yes, what they're doing is targeting everybody's property in Samford. So we are all going to be targeted. We are all going to be poisoned up to 6 times. There are parts on the scenic rim that are being poisoned up to 11 and 12 times. So what we're going to do now is, anybody got any questions that you'd like to put forward to us this evening?
I've got a few, so I just want to go through them. With them coming onto our properties, I chased 2 groups of fire ant eradicators in our cul-de-sac in Deception Bay. They went onto properties where no one was actually home. I went in and I said, "Who gave you the authority? You're trespassing." "No, we have the authority." Is anyone aware of Glenn Harris? Yeah? So my concern is, and I've only learned recently, that there's been changes made to title deeds, etc. People are having trouble getting their title deed. Sorry. And I'm wondering if this, "No, we have the authority to come on," is because, do we own the land anymore? They have the authority. They're being tyrannical. That's number one. I actually have on video.
Can I just answer that question quickly?
Yep.
No connection whatsoever.
Sorry?
No connection whatsoever.
So we have to comply?
It's because get back to the word eradication.
Yeah.
It gives them special powers under the Act when they're and they don't need your permission to enter.
Okay.
That's written into the Biosecurity Act within the eradication zone. Got a surveillance program. They're allowed to come onto your property without your permission.
Is this a smokescreen though, because they're not going to come out and say to us that we no longer own our properties, so they're just doing it a different way?
No, there's no connection there.
Okay. So I got rid of 2 teams of fire eradicators in our cul-de-sac. They were going on properties, as I said, where no one was home. One young fellow said to me, because I said, "There's no fire ants here. There's none." He goes, "Well, I've got this device on me that tells us there's fire ants in the area." And I've got it on video. How can there's some little device, he says, that they use to show that there's fire ants in the area. To me, it's a load of crap. But has anyone heard of that?
Yeah.
I've actually got it on video if anyone's... Salt is, I've seen, is another way of eradicating them, a natural way. Do we know if all our politicians' properties are actually being targeted? Do we know that?
They're saying no property can be exempt. Even if you have chemical reactions, they are actually saying to the people, "Well, you need to leave your property for 2 or 3 days and we will pay for you to leave your property." I mean, what kind of program makes you leave your own property? And you have a chemical sensitivity here. It's just disgusting. And our children absorb chemicals much more quickly than adults, so we have no idea how these endocrine disruptors that Connie talked about is affecting our children.
Absolutely.
But yeah, can we move
Yeah, I was just going to say one last thing. We ask our Indigenous how they deal with it. We don't ask them anything.
Yeah, that's one thing I have been talking to some of our Indigenous people, and they are going to come forward in the very near future. Yes, sir.
Hi, for Hugh, under the Police Responsibilities Act, the police are not part of biosecurity unless they've been commissioned to do that, and they must show you a form that they have been given that authority to act under the Biosecurity Act. What I've seen in the video, they can just supply that form and they arrested that lady. Would you know anything more about whether they, because under the Police Responsibilities Act, they do not have any powers or jurisdiction under the Biosecurity Act. So how can they be arresting someone when they're not empowered to be there in the first place?
They didn't arrest that lady, and their powers to arrest.
Go a bit louder.
The powers to arrest did not extend to the Biosecurity Act. They were charged, is my understanding, with obstructing, not following the police order, a reasonable request from a police officer. If they had, then there was going to be a full-on discussion in the court about the fire ant program. But I think by charging her under something different, they completely avoid it. And just as a matter of interest, coppers can actually do extra work over time with permission of the police department to actually earn a bit of extra money, and they're basically to keep the peace or assist in relation to traffic hazards. Oftentimes we find a couple of coppers floating around when somebody's moving a house on a big trailer at night time, things like that, and they go along just to smooth the way. But they're not there as a police officer per se. They're supposed to be there to either keep the peace or just make things flow a little bit more evenly. They're not there for a particular purpose of enforcing the Biosecurity Act. It's just very tricky, actually.
Hugh, if somebody has a reasonable excuse, sorry, my voice. If somebody has a reasonable excuse, as you just discussed, and they fail and they're asking biosecurity to leave their property because they have a reasonable excuse, the compliance officer says, I don't care, then is that a is that a lawful order by the police when they say, do not obstruct them if you have a reasonable excuse?
The answer to the question is only going to be determined if it goes to court.
It's only going to be a reasonable excuse if it's actually determined by a court. It's
actually got to get that far, but finally get a resolution as to whether that's reasonable or not.
Hang on a minute, can we keep this rolling, please? Hugh, sorry.
Yes?
I have two questions. One, that may be for our, sorry I forgot my name by listening there. With the baiting that has been happening, it's on foot, and we've also had helicopters and everything else, even surveillancing our properties without permission. Drones being used. There has been an increase in drones at nighttime activity as well. Is drones one way that they could be doing things as well?
Yeah, definitely. They're using drones, and they're using drones to bait as well. So, and they've got I guess, detection devices at the bottom of helicopters that are really good at picking up hot cow powder. Really good at picking up.
I guess my other question is for our doctor here. The chemical breakdown, If they're dropping baits, the baits are going onto our reefs, which are going into our water tanks. We're talking about our health and the health of our children. The accumulation of these toxins in our systems and the damage that is doing. What's the breakdown? Is there that residue in our water and on our feet?
Well, it's going in the water, then yes, from the roof into the water, then releasing in the water, and the water is, it depends on the level, but if it's above the normal standards, then yes, it does definitely.
Thank you.
No one is actually testing anything unless we don't know about it. Everything is secret squirrel with this government. If they're going around and testing our water without us knowing and monitoring the amounts of pyroproxene and methylene in our water supply, they're not telling us. So therefore, we have to go out and pay for that testing to be done. Now, there's no doubt it's accumulating. So who's going to pay for the testing to keep them honest? They're not going to come up front and say, oh yeah, it's in your water supply. They've had to do it with the PFAS, but in 10 years' time they'll be telling you your pyroproxene and methylene is in your water supply, if they continue.
Can I just say this program, if you look at their website, it says it's cabinet in confidence. They won't release the details of this program. It's cabinet in confidence. One thing people should do is video these people when they do come to the property. If they force their way on with police, just video them the whole time. It's totally lawful to do that, isn't it, Hugh? And they will just keep coming back with the police.
Before, Will, you said that they have extra powers because it's an eradication zone. Is there any way that we can get them to justify it, to keep it as an eradication, not force them to call it a containment zone? Is there a process where we can shift from the eradication to containment so they don't have those extra powers?
And that will give them less powers, yes. It's people power.
People power is how we're going to do it.
So one of the things that I've been advised is that they must have. I keep thinking it's a deed of assignment, but it's actually called something else. That they're supposed to, that these guys are supposed to have when they show up, and they're supposed to show it. So what's the penalties for them, A, not having that? My understanding is that means that they're impersonating a government official, and it's a $48,000 fine. But also, what are the penalties or for them breaching the permits that they're waving in everyone's faces? So you can prove they're breaching it, and yeah, get it on camera, because they will flat out just go, yeah, we don't care. What are the penalties for that permit being breached? There've got to be penalties somewhere, surely.
There are several penalties. When they come to see you, they should always ask for, have a look at their ID badge. And
it's not the ID badge, there's supposed to be a certificate of...
Yeah, a certificate of authority under the High Security Act. And sometimes they put that written on the back of their ID badge. Sometimes they carry it as a piece of paper. I used to carry it as a piece of paper.
My understanding was it was supposed to be a separate piece of paper, and the ID badge means nothing, because you can just print one of them off.
They need to be authorised by the Chief Executive Officer, as authorised officer under that he gives them the power to do that. If they're not authorised, and if they haven't got that badge, and they're not, you can ask to have a look at that badge, have a look at it. They have to give that, and you should be able to have a look at that badge.
Is that each member of the team should be authorised, or just the lead member?
No, when I used to do it, it's one. You're one person of the team, and you can bring anyone else you want in with you.
But what are the penalties for breaching the permits? Like acting in contravention of the permits that they're waiving? What are the penalties?
They were given the equivalent of 2 penalty points for doing the contamination of Dawson Creek, and as you saw, they had to pay a fine of $20,000, but they ended up not paying it. They're now just running a study on native ants, which they should have done years ago, and they're only looking at native ant populations. What about the bees? It's just totally inadequate what they're doing right now.
So they're practicing studies for something they're already doing. That's remarkable, don't you think? And don't you think that when we asked them for a risk assessment, Reese Pianta from the Invasive Species Council pretty much told me I was loco, thinking that this stuff is poison. And we do not need a risk assessment, so get over it, is what he said to me.
And they said it's not a poison. It is a poison. It impairs an organism. The definition of a poison is anything that impairs an organism. It makes the queen ants infertile, so it's poison.
Just another question regarding the eradication from accepting other methods of ant control, fire ant control.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Their main goal is eradication, though. It gives them other powers. But no, they could still, you could still have alternative methods, for sure.
And they could, so they're not prevented by their own organisation from doing it?
No.
The one they're using is nicknamed brute force. And it's written in a document that Bernard Young, I can't remember his name, but the 10-year plan, and he stated it. It's called brute force, and there are alternatives, and he put them out there, and he said rather than using the brute force method, but none of them have ever been looked at. They've only ever followed brute force and indiscriminate and unnecessary baiting. That's what they're doing day after day after day. Tons and tons of this stuff is getting dropped all over the land indiscriminately.
And the proof is, when did you last wash a dead bug off your windscreen? That is scary, isn't it? And when I bring that up to people, they look at me and they go, shit, I haven't washed a bug off my windscreen for a long time. My father used to put fly wire on his grill because the bugs used to fill the radiator. You used to be able to buy stuff, put it into your windscreen wiper water to melt the bugs off your windscreen. Well, there's no bugs to be smashing against your windscreen.
And I just wondered, someone who asked about, is it a registered, like is it a chemical? That old mate said it wasn't a chemical. Well, it is because, because it's assessed by the regulator. The regulator only assesses chemicals. They don't assess feed supplements. They assess chemicals. So it has to be a chemical.
It's certainly a chemical, because we've seen frogs coming along with no legs. That's insane.
G'day. So I was just wondering if they are allowed to enter up with a reasonable excuse, what are our actions really? Like, where do we go from there? So if they come, you give the reasonable excuse, they don't accept it.
Yeah, they're actually allowed to still, if they don't deem your excuse reasonable, which they don't seem to assume that anyone has a reasonable excuse, they can then come on your property, and we've had a barrister advise us that it's up to us to then take them to court at a later date, but they've already done the damage. The law is stacked against us, and the law is there to protect them, nothing to help us.
And we've also been hunting for investigative journalists. We seem to not be able to find a journalist that wants to step up and investigate. Anytime we've ever talked to a journalist, they've said, "Oh, put something together for us so we can see what we can do with it." So if there is any journalist in here this evening, please come forth, because we'd love to have a chat with a really good journalist. We'd love to stand with the really good journalist.
We've been spending time too and volunteer work, but I was just wondering if there's any current legal or civil cases going on against what has been happening either here or in other areas that could be got behind and help along with either finances or more legal backing that people would be volunteering or getting into or putting some money into?
Yeah, well, like I don't know if you heard earlier, I have set up a GoFundMe to support the resident in Samford that is now defending her charge of obstructing police. It's ongoing. It should go to trial in September. We do have to pay some legal costs for that, so it's important that the community rallies around and shows that we are behind her. And also, if anyone else ends up getting arrested in the meantime, that we've got funds to support them as well. We have got a top criminal lawyer at the moment defending this lady, and we are quite hopeful that, you know, this will be the first time it's going to be challenged in court. But again, she was arrested under the police powers, the Police Act, not the Biosecurity Act. Whereas we really would love to challenge it under the Biosecurity Act, which is section 336 that I talked about.
Not a question, just a fun fact for everyone. I've got a friend that's coming back from up north shortly, and his child did survival camping with the Steiner School in, I think it was 2012, 2013, and his child got attacked by fire ants in Watside Road at Daybreak. The Daybreak in Watside Road, and that was 2012.
So yeah,
Great work, guys. Well done. That $1 billion that you mentioned before has been spent to date on eradication and $169 million. Has anybody ever done an audit into this? It seems like a hideous amount of money, and perhaps even embarrassing people if you were to look closely into the funding of the program and who were the beneficiaries.
Yeah, well, you know, we have looked into it, but like I said, a lot of their information is happening in confidence, so they don't really share a lot. There was a report that came out years ago that said something like 40% of their funding is spent on head office jobs. So all the people sat in the head office strategising about how they're going to kill fire ants gets most of this funding.
and 10 million they've spent and are still spending on propaganda. So all that crap that they put out there with, you know, babies that have got swollen and attacked by fire ants, it's all propaganda. They've spent $10 million on their propaganda.
My questions to Jim and the team. When moving vehicles and people from one country to another, we have aquas which certify that equipment hasn't got dirt or insects on your shoes or in the tread of your tyres or so on. Could the fire ant prevention team, the eradication team, be in fact spreading the fire ants with their own equipment because it's not decontaminated between sites? So before it comes onto my place, am I going to be served with a certificate that the vehicle is free from dirt, dust and any biological material?
That's a good question. Well, they should give you, really best practice is to give you a declaration that they have washed down that vehicle to prevent the spread of any pathogens or weed seeds or whatever. A bit unlikely that fire ants would, but it is potentially possible. I just want to go back to, remember when I talked about vectors and the spread through, whether it's soil on vehicles, soil movement, pot plants, mulch, earth rooting machinery that's working a lot, because that's where you find a lot of fire ants in housing developments. That's where a lot of them are, the new areas down around Ripley and stuff.
like back in the early 2000s, they had a whole team of inspectors that used to go out and look at these high-risk areas because they contained a lot of potential pathways, you know, a lot of earth-moving machinery and that. They actually, I think they went from 15 inspectors down to 2. So that's where you saw a lot of spread happen after that because they weren't containing the spread vectors, and that's where you're seeing an explosion. Because remember, it costs money if to clean down a machine or to quarantine a machine, and we need to look at what forces were there for the government to pull back on that important part of the program to stop those spread vectors, because that's what goes to new areas, that's what aids the spread. Why did they take those staff and close down that unit? Because that's very important to minimise the spread, and you can see what's happened with that. All through those housing estates, they're everywhere.
They don't want to eradicate them anymore.
They already spread this out of their containment, and that was by moving herbs. It was to only...
Question here. Questions? Oh, it's you, of course.
Thanks, man. Yeah, quick, I'm not sure who to, but I have not been able to find anywhere in law where it is required to do an environmental assessment before some action such as this. Do you know at all, Hugh, or anyone? Jim, please?
Sorry, are you asking were they...
What legislation dictates when an Environmental Assessment Act must be done before the actions, such as they're doing now?
If it's, we asked Reece to answer that question, didn't we? And he actually said because it's not a resources project, not a mining project, they don't need to do an environmental risk assessment.
Yeah, they don't, but it would be best practice even by the chemical regulator to actually, if they're doing such a widespread area, and like who said it then, some of these areas have been treated up to 11 times, you would think before issuing other temporary permits, changing in permits, that they can do assessments on what the impact is of multiple frequent treatments across the same area. That should really be done as best practice by the regulator to make sure that issuing these permits, that they're not harming the environment through that. Because it's just, like we know, it's just not a one-off application, it's multiple applications year after year after year.
And that's Mark Lerner, Minister of Agriculture, that there is no need whatsoever for an environmental impact study nor a risk assessment with such a program.
Governments don't need environmental impact studies for stuff they want to do.
I reckon there'd be enough. I was hoping for some specific sections, but I believe we could find enough to force them to do it. For example, under the Environment Protection Act, I have never heard anyone mention the principle of proportionality or the precautionary principle. I mean, to take it to their logical conclusion, all they need to do is keep baiting the land with pyriproxyfen and spraying it with S-methylbrine every week or so. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So at what stage is there too many chemicals spread around? And how do we use the Environment Protection Act?
Well, that's right. The question needs to be asked. It's all about political pressure. And so this is what you need to ask, like people like Tony Perrott, who's basically now like the CEO of Biosecurity in Queensland. He's the Minister for Primary Industries. And so these questions need to be put in because I like the idea of the precautionary principle. And that's what we should do.
It applies everywhere. Medicine, chemical. I believe a lot of the answer might be in the Queensland Criminal Code Act 1899. The man down here, refusal, Section 200, refusal by a public officer to perform duty and that would then lead to a breach of 204 disobedience to statute law where they don't allow their ID card to be, I forget the wording, examined, but it's not, they can't just flick their finger up to their ID card, and that's not right. And for a legal question, the police that come along to enforce, for goodness sake, they don't have enough police to do the work that they should be doing. They're there to serve and protect. But under their Police Powers and Responsibilities Act, they can dictate that we must allow these morons to come on our land and poison it. The product information safety data sheets for pyriproxyfen and S-methoprene, one of them has a hazard, number 3, H351, suspected of causing cancer. Would a copper bring his little children along, or a fire ant bloke person, sorry, female or male, bring their little children along to play in the poison after it's down, knowing it's suspected of causing cancer? S-methoprene not to be released into the environment, for God's sake. No wonder Christina got hysterical, but I can't see that the police aren't breaching their own law somehow or other by forcing that upon people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. They've been acting as bullies.
Well, the police officer the other day, when one of our people were arrested, he actually said to me, oh, well, he didn't actually say it to me, but he did say it to some passing officers that were actually putting the poison out. Why aren't you wearing a mask and gloves? That's what the police officer said. Yeah. And I said to him, well, give Reese Pianta a call because apparently you can eat it. It's not poisonous.
Oh. We were invited to the, I think it's in Caboolture depot, where they're running some of the fire ant eradication, fire ant cuddling processes. And the young people there who were in charge of the demonstration assured me that it's perfectly safe, Jim. So what I'm saying is that what you're doing, Trevor, and Sarah and Connie, getting the data, making recordings of everything that happens, and doing the research on the peer-reviewed science, that's fabulous, because you can't beat them just by pretending you have data. You've got to have the data, and then you've got to have the consequences, and then you've got to have your log with all the observation. You stitch it together. You've got to be lawyers.
Thank you. Here, we'll have another question here.
Okay, I was very seriously injured. And I didn't know how it happened, but there was rain from helicopters in Yogo, which is about 5 kilometers from, or 6 kilometers from here. And I was working in a garden, and nice wind was blowing in. I was sweating, and so what happened that I developed this terrible rush and boils, and has been going now for 10 weeks. I had to go to emergency 3 times, and I explained to doctor what happened, but they said, we don't know, we are puzzled, right? So spraying like in open gas chamber, like in during Second World War, they were poisoning Jews in confined areas, so the others didn't get poisoned. But here, they seem to be happy to poison whoever is on the way. So we have to do something about it, because, I'm still getting this reaction. Obviously, there is a toxin inside me, maybe in a liver, and it's coming out all the time. I get these boils coming up continuously. Has been going now for 10 weeks. Yeah. So I don't want to go through this. I don't want to go through this experience again.
I think you need to go.
This is really quite interesting because this gentleman was at a rally, or well, not a rally, at a gathering that we were at, and along with some other people, there was this gentleman who was in the Samford region, which was poisoned 10 days prior to, or 7 days prior to us meeting him. He showed us this rash that was really chronic. Then at that same meeting, there was a lady from the Scenic Rim who had just had helicopters spraying this poison around her place. Believe it or not, she had the same symptoms. Then there was another person who was there who showed us photographs of her son who were poisoned north of here and exactly the same symptoms. Now that's not, I don't know, does that seem coincidental, or is this symptoms from toxic chemicals floating through our air? I have someone else here who would like to have a question or something to say.
Thanks, Ben. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, awesome. I'm going to walk and talk at the same time because I can't help myself. I'm sitting at the back. I came in here late and I feel like I'm just trying to, almost going to explode. Almost going to explode with anticipation. Like, what can we take away from this that can empower us as community? I see 227 people I counted here tonight. Now, as far as reactions go, I spent a night in Prince Charles Hospital. I had a reaction to S-methylprednisolone. They didn't even come onto my property, it was just doing the nature strip. So if it's going to put me, I've been a landscaper and a state landscape architecture. I've been watching the fire ants expand since 2001. I've been through this whole thing with Landscape Queensland. It's been affecting my industry for the last 24 years. And I'm tired of it, I'm sick of it. Also, then I end up in hospital because S-methylprednisolone was sprayed around our property. So if I'm going to react, and I'm a healthy 58-year-old, other people are going to react, someone's going to die. So this is what I'm concerned about, is that we're fed a lot of bullshit. Now, when I worked in Sydney, I worked in landscaper, I worked in 3 different countries as a landscaper. When I was working in Sydney, I did a job for a man called Clive Small. Does anyone here know the name Clive Small? Ivan Milat. I don't know who Ivan Milat was. Clive Small was the detective who arrested Ivan Milat. Now, when I was working for Clive, I was building his deck and doing his landscaping whilst I was working for Clive Small. And I know he's a famous man. He's the loveliest guy I've ever met. Anyway, he was the previous Assistant Police Commissioner in New South Wales. He had just been ousted in a political move. It was just a political move, not because he wasn't a very good person at doing his job. He was probably too good. He was a threat to the police commissioner. So he got shafted. And that's a political move that you all know about, which just happens all the time. Now, what happened to Clive is he got moved because he got politically shafted. He had such good kudos in the New South Wales Police and the environment. He got moved to something called ICAC. You guys heard of ICAC? Anyone heard of ICAC? ICAC. Independent Commission Against Corruption. Is there, because this whole NFAAP thing smells of corruption. It smells of bullshit. We all know it. And they're playing us like idiots and just spreading chemical and shit everywhere, dismantling our rights as humans. And we've had all this talk tonight about that. Is there something I can take away with me tonight that empowers me as a community member so I don't have this happen to me? No? Because all I've heard tonight is that we've heard about your machine, and that's great. We need lots of them, thousands of them.
The thing is, the only thing that's going to stop them is people power. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no letter. There's nothing. There's no letter that you can write that's going to stop them. So it's people power. So what I've done with AAG is I've got service agreements here, and I get people to sign the service agreements, and what that is just demonstrating that people have had enough and they're suffering the hurt that you're describing, and I send that off to the program. I say, look, here's another one. So the more people that we get, whether you need advocacy or not, is irrelevant. So the whole purpose of that whole thing is just to annoy the program and to have a demonstrated grievances of all these people that have gone to the effort, get a JP to witness their service agreement, sign a service agreement, we can send it off to the program. So at the moment there's a few dozen contracts that they've already got, and I would encourage everyone, if they wanted to, they could sign a service agreement, and I can sign it, and then we can go through the process. That's one thing, and then the other thing that we can practically do together is object to the notices that they put into our letterboxes. So Sarah's done up a template that she can forward anyone, or we can do it through the advocacy group. It's on the sheets here. But so object to these notices by throwing them in the bin. People say, oh, they're not addressed to me, so I don't have to worry about it. It's just junk mail. That is like a tacit agreement to them, saying that you agree. So by not doing anything, you're sort of agreeing for them to do it. So being proactive is something that we approach. They're really, really, really bad at communicating. The National Fire Ant Eradication Program does not know how to engage with the community.
Because they don't want to.
They just can't do it. So just writing them a question or writing a statement or asking for clarity on any issue, that could just delay them for months because they don't know how to respond to you. So they're breaching their own biosecurity act by not engaging with the community and acting in a manner that the community would expect from them. So a proactive approach is writing a letter to them, objecting to the notices, and just engaging like that, because they just don't know how to answer anyone. Because literally, like Sarah says, they want to make everyone 100% of the properties in the eradication zone 3 to 4 times a year from now to the end of time, because that's what they want to do. So, and we all know repeated excessive exposure to these toxic chemicals will create problems, and it has created problems. And some people in the eradication zone, like Sarah said, like I was baited since 2019, and it was like 5 years before I seen problems with Workhouse. But a lot of people haven't had that exposure, and they're only in their second year now. So when they get into their third, fourth and fifth year, that's when more problems will become evident in the community. But we want to stop it before other people can do that. So the only way we can do it is all together and have your voice heard, and just say, that's why we've got these signs and says stand by us and just say no, and that's what we'll do.
Yeah, exactly. We've got all those signs.
Is there one of my major questions? Is there an independent commission against corruption in Queensland or around Queensland, or something that we can take all this beautiful information to and present a case?
Hi, I'm Gary. So to answer your question about the corruption side of it, right, which is your focus on it, to have I'm not a lawyer, right, I'm not a barrister, but to get your corruption level to the level of beyond reasonable doubt is which you've got to reach. And the only way you can get that in the first instance is if they misrepresented the data to achieve their current funding. So if they've gone to the Parliament with misrepresented data about their successes or their knowing full well that they could not achieve that and receive funding for that, then that reaches that level of where it can be considered corrupt conduct. Right? So the only thing is that data that they use to get the funding is confidential. Okay? So Connie and I have tried to get it. I've tried many places to try and find what the data is that they use to get the current funding, and we can't get it. But that should be public. If that was public, I think we would find the corrupt conduct in there. And we all know that the spokesperson who got on Current Affair there, Reece, is Nikki Boyd's husband, right? MP from Pine Rivers, right? and he is the spokesperson for that. And he does all the communication and everything else, and he's heavily involved in that. His previous job was he was a union representative. Right? So how you get a six-figure continuous job? The firing program is like the Bruce Highway. You'll never run out of funding for it as long as you keep going. So you'll keep supplying jobs to it, and that's what it is. But your question is about where the corrupt conduct would be, and that is the only avenue that we would have, and it's a very slither, but we can't get the data to find out what they use to justify the current funding in eradication as against containment. So they're almost one step away from the CCC. That's why there's so much pushback to stop the CCC from getting that extra power. So they're just sitting just right on the balance of CCC. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Just when, like, we need to find out what's the, because each grain's got a certain amount of, I guess, active ingredient in it that they throw out of the chopper, all that. But what's the variance of that, and how often is that tested? I know my days in the government when we used to use monofluoroacetate as a bait towards feral animals. We actually, after all those years, we had 40 tonne of the stuff, we actually tested it, and some of the containers had 0 active ingredient in there, and some had 3 times the amount. So what quality control are they undertaking? And that's why you might be getting a variance in exposure to people. So there's an issue there. And quite recently, you remember, it was in the news, I think last week before, that Minister Parrott for Primary Industries, who's controlled the program, he actually, remember, he said he waited another 12 months to implement the review. And one of the reasons that was he wanted to just get through another 12 months. There's something in the performance indicators, if there's over 1% of the properties that actually refuse chemicals on their properties, well, that's a key performance indicator that they haven't met, hatred. And so, and really it's the way they're measuring it. It comes back to this person's point here, that they don't measure all that because they really need to take into account people that, because they keep badgering people, let us on, and some people go, all right, mate, just do it. But really it's that front up, people first saying no, all that needs to be captured, and I think you'll find there's way more than 1% of people who say they don't want their properties faded. So again, and I know you did that media release on that, Trevor.
So, Canavan, what's his name? Matt Canavan was at the estimates hearing, and there's a transcript of it on the internet available. You type in Senate estimates or whatever, and there's one in late February, I think it was. And in the eradication zone, it was documented of 140,000 properties treated in the last 12 months. And they recorded 1,442 objections that required police intervention to treat, so that's people that were objecting. But like Jim was just saying, they used coercive control strategies, threats of $16,000 fines or police arrest, and if they keep doing that to people, then people do cave in. And I think someone here too said about people just go to work and they just pay to buy a work type offence and just do it without anyone even knowing. So there's probably a large percentage of that too. And that's why it's important to keep a track ourselves. We can't trust them with data because A, they don't release it, they hide in a dark hole of corruption and top secret in the window. So by keeping a track of it ourselves, then at least then we have the data and we have the power. Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks, Trevor. I used to have my best control licence. I had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get that licence, had to do a whole bunch of training. I feel that a lot of these people aren't trained professionally. But my question is, under the AVPMA and the Biosecurity Act, they must, once they treat a property, leave a note to say what they've treated with. how much they've used, what area they've treated on. Is that actually being adhered to?
They are leaving notices in people's mailbox that they have treated their property, and they are saying what they've used, but they either say half property, front of property, rear of property, or whole property. But interestingly, some of the chemicals they're now adding to those lists aren't just pyriproxyfen and S-methoprene, but indoxacarb, which is a really nasty is PFAS insecticide. So I don't understand why they're allowed to broad-scale spread that as well. But
Sorry, so does that also include public places, so nature strips, where they'll treat, it'll rain, and that washes through the front of your property, affecting your land? Does that include that? By law, they should leave a note in your letterbox saying they've treated that area.
yeah, they don't even have notices up that they're, other than one notice, they don't say exactly where they're going. Each street should have notices up for at least a week saying this area is being treated, but they're not even doing that. But I just want people to know here as well, we do have messenger groups and signal groups that we're now using as alert groups, because like Trevor was saying, we're only going to stop this with people power. And, you know, if we connect with our neighbours and we're being targeted, we can call upon our neighbours and say, hey, can you come and help me? They might even just be able to help film it for you. But, I mean, imagine if next time they come to town with the police officers, 30 to 50 of us show up on a property, like what happened the other day when we did a current affair. They, you know, if there's lots of us there and it's getting media attention, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the programme, and they cannot keep doing it if they're getting this much resistance.
2 copies going Red 50.
They are bullies. They are bullies that bully you to the nth degree. If we didn't turn up the other day where that lady was arrested, believe you me, that poor girl would have been in a whole spot of bondage. We were there for support for her. I have another question here.
Just 1 sec before we go on that. So that same guy that arrested that lady, that same policeman, there was 4 clients of the AAG that were due to get treated, I think about a week or 2 before that. And I published on my social medias that I was going to go and obstruct the police and stop them from treating my clients because my clients had a reasonable excuse. And I went there and I put the word out. We had 20 or 30 people rock up to their 4 houses, and it's over a month now, it's close to 6 weeks since that day. They didn't rock up and they didn't arrest supported people. They arrest vulnerable women in particular. That's what they do. Unsupported, vulnerable women, that's who these people target. So by getting into groups and standing firm, you can stop them, they go away, they're cowards.
Okay, another question.
Yeah, this is more for the action group and on behalf of some of the people that obviously not heard about. So there's 3 people here mentioned that have toxin, poison or sort of burn or reaction. Is there a public, can there be a public calling to find out if this has happened all over Australia whenever these chemicals are being used, so that there's a, similar to a TGA complaint, we can get 100 people with, injuries that have occurred?
So what should happen is you need to go to the ADVMN. They have like the TGA, an adverse event. You need to report an adverse event. I tried to get the data of adverse event, and they wouldn't tell me. They just told me the overall data, which wasn't quite helpful because they look after so many chemicals. But if we keep all reporting this, the numbers will go up, and then we can ask them via and write to information.
Yeah, if that's the case, can that information be passed on to our senators, which are representing us today, so that can be forwarded to Canberra or so on?
Yeah, and they will. And just before I give it to Malcolm to answer that, the ABVMA has responded to me that if an investigation is imminent from the information that they gathered, they will not release that information. So if they find that there's negligence on their behalf or on behalf of the Queensland Government, they will not provide you that information on that report, and I've got that information from them.
Hang on a minute, I've got another question.
Thank you for the information tonight. I wanted to go back to what Dr. Tunney told us about the degradation of the chemicals. What causes the degradation? In particular, I'm thinking, like, I know that we're instructed not to irrigate or mow after treatment. What does irrigation do? Does it wash it away? Does it deactivate it, or does it degrade it?
Irrigation, it's a concrete with soy oil where the toxin is in, and that soaks up, and then obviously it degrades when it soaks up, and so it theoretically should release the chemicals then into the environment.
Yeah, so the corn bread's got 3 ingredients, and the oil is the attractant.
Does that mean your battery's going to die?
20%.
My hand's
The
going
most
to
important ingredient is the oil. That's why they say not to irrigate, because the water will wash the oil away from the cornbread and the ant will walk straight past it. So therefore what's left is a cornbread impregnated with the chemical. And that doesn't go until the heavy rain washes it into our waterways or disperses it onto the ground and into the soil. The other thing is that it has an 18-day half-life. I think this is pyroproxyfen, I'm not sure about S-methoprene, but it has an 18-day half-life. That's so 18 days it's still half strength. After that, it could take another 45, 50 days to actually change and morph into these other chemicals that are more dangerous and more toxic than the original chemical. So with all this heavy rain, all of this is getting washed into our waterways and into dams, into our water supplies, and it's being concentrated.
Pretty scary.
Yeah.
It's a bit outside my area of expertise, but it appears to me the way the treatment happens now, we do one little block somewhere, then they go away, they come back, and they do another little block somewhere. It seems very non-systematic, and I don't understand how can you then say that you're not going to just spread it from one block to the next. It seems the process that we're now adopting is just completely flawed. I can't see how it would ever work. Has anyone asked that question?
We constantly ask that question. They willy-nilly just do here, over there and up there and around the corner. I always thought if you're going to be putting a poison around something that is in there, you'd go all the way around, wouldn't you? But no, they do here one day and then they'll go down there and go and do a bit over there. They just want to get rid of this product as a money laundering event.
In the States, they have community, like I was talking about syndicates, and they all bake at the same time or use a product at the same time, twice a season. So it's all baited at once, and that would be a lot more effective.
Yeah. You were talking about the irrigation before. We saw the helicopter doing our neighbour's farm. We've got farm down here, Barron. And they were doing the farm, and I was watching the helicopter come up and go over the top of the irrigator while it's irrigating. So I rang them up and I said, "You're irrigating over the top of the irrigator." They said, "No, we're turning it off when it goes over the irrigator." I said, "The irrigator is walking up the paddock, it's going to water exactly where you go." Yeah. 20 seconds later, the helicopter disappeared.
They often know they're wrong. They often know they're wrong.
Can I just say as well, with the inconsistencies, some people are negotiating with them and they think that that's okay. But so what they're saying is, just do this part of my property, but don't do that part. So I've got evidence that 5-acre properties, only 2 to 2.5 acres, are being baited because they don't want it put on their vegetable patch. But then I live on like 1 acre and I'm not allowed an exemption for the whole acre despite all my neighbours being done. So none of it makes any sense. this is a box-ticking exercise. It's nothing about eradicating fire ants.
Well,
That gentleman over there, we would love information. We hold them accountable to Senate estimates in various other ways. If you've got any information, just package it up nicely. I don't mean put bells and whistles on it, just make it succinct, send it to our office, and then we'll contact you. We love that at Senate estimates.
I spoke to a person the other day at the rally, and they basically said that in 2008, from 2008 onwards, they had heaps of fire ants and they have never come back to this place. So, what's the use of spraying everything else if you don't go back there and
Well, those of you who saw A Current Affair, you would have seen at the end there that lady by the name of whatever her name is, had however many nests on her property, all alive. Nobody goes there and treats her place, and she's down in the south side.
And the other reason why they do that, they go here and here, is that's a strategy that they use to try and, you've got Sarah chasing her around and trying to put pressure on them. So, like whack-a-moles, I don't know if you're playing whack-a-moles, they just go there and then they hit fast, hit hard, and then go, and then they're over here. So we've got no ability to keep up with it. But by playing them silly games that they're playing, it's even less effective what they're doing than zero effective.
We're actually looking for some data that I know Sarah's got in her little collection of paperwork, and I'm sure Connie would have it. And that data is where they said if these fire ants jump the containment line, our eradication program will be halted. Now, these fire ants are now down in Ballina. They're up as far as Toowoomba. They're now giving talks to people in Gympie. These fire ants have jumped their eradication containment zone, so we need to hold them to task to that, and I want to start getting that sorted in the next few days.
Yeah, anyway, like I said, we need to connect together our communities, talk to your neighbours, get a support network. We've got a north side, a south side, Facebook messenger groups, and you can join them and then try to find other people in your neighbourhood, because that's what we're trying to do, empower people to come together and support each other, because we will only do it power and strength in numbers. But I think we need to wrap it up. We've gone way over time. Yeah, well, the 16,000 is the maximum penalty. So at the moment, I think there's been 2 or 3 penalties of like $160. A lady at the Gold Coast refused to pay it, and she disputed it. They then put it into Spurs, and they chased it out, and she refuted it, and now they seem to have dropped it again. So it's a... Yeah, it's the same one. Yeah. And look, and not enough people are challenging it. They literally get that final notice saying if you don't let us in, you're going to get $16,000. Most people fold. And most people then do their negotiation where they say, okay, well, just do over here, just do my driveway, don't do my area where my kids play. So they tick you off as compliant.
It's legal under the legislation. It's legal under the legislation, under the rights of area. In their eyes, it's legal.
She should fight it one up, right?
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do, and this court case is going to be very important to see whether we can challenge it. We've got them all on our Facebook pages. I'm Fire Treatment Alternatives. I've got a Facebook page, so if anyone wants to contact me, they can do through that. And I do have a lot of audio information I can share with you.
Now, all you people that are here tonight are obviously concerned. Can you share this concern with all the people you know? Can you please spread this word? Wake people up around you, because until the majority are woken up against them, overreaching government, spending all of our taxpayers' money on such a sham, please, people, talk to the people. Please.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you to Senator Malcolm Roberts and Hugh Carter and Jim Wilmot and Dr. Connie Turnley and everyone else who's spoken. Ben.
Yes.
Gary.
Thank you. I think we got to run. Brett's looking pretty tired over there. So I don't know how you want to turn that. How do you turn that on? We had 24 people on there, pretty consistent.
How do we stop?